He was trying to impress Truman. He thought it was something that Truman would like to hear. And he got that wrong a lot. Welcome to Watch This Channel, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 moments Oppenheimer got factually right. Strauss would have deliberately destroyed the name and reputation and government position of Robert. And when he destroyed something, he destroyed it thoroughly. For this list, we're looking at the historical accuracy of Christopher Nolan's film about the father of the atomic bomb. Unlike some other biopics, Nolan really did his homework. There are a few spoilers for cinephiles and history buffs. Were you impressed with Oppenheimer? Number 10. Oppenheimer learned Dutch in 6 weeks. Early in the film, Oppenheimer delivers a lecture in the Netherlands. The only American in attendance is physicist Isidore Isaac Rabi, who assumes he'll have to translate for everyone else. It's the other way around, as Oppenheimer learned Dutch over 6 weeks just for this speech. Although it's implied that Oppenheimer and Rabi subsequently formed a friendship on a train ride, they actually first got to know each other in Leipzig. However, Oppenheimer was naturally gifted when it came to picking up languages. In addition to English and Dutch, he was well versed in French, German, Greek, and Latin. He even studied Sanskrit, a sacred language from India. Through his Sanskrit studies, he was introduced to Bhagavad Gita, which largely molded Oppenheimer's world philosophy. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. Number 9. Kitty Pruning was married when she met Oppenheimer. When Oppenheimer met his future wife, Catherine, Pruning was already wedded to Richard Harrisonheimer. Actually only had several girlfriends between his breakup with Jean Tatlock and marriage to Pruning. Almost everything about their courtship is accurate. However, from meeting at a garden party to Oppenheimer inviting Pruning and Harrison to stay at his New Mexico ranch, Harrison declined, but Pruning took him up. When Pruning became pregnant with Oppenheimer's child, Harrison agreed to divorce so she could remarry. They fell in love, and by 1940 she was pregnant. Following son Peter's birth, the couple went through a difficult adjustment and trusting the baby to friend Haken Chevalier and a nurse for the summer. The Oppenheimers later had a daughter named Toni, who they passed to a fellow Los Alamos mother, Pat Shore, for a period. Number 8. People thought Oppenheimer couldn't run a hot dog stand. Oppenheimer was a brilliant mind, but few felt he was qualified to oversee the Manhattan Project's secret lab. He was kind of this ethereal personality. He had no record of having big achievements. He never held such a position of leadership. His political leanings gave authority figures pause, and he didn't even have a Nobel Prize. One of the scientists who knew Oppenheimer said, "This is a man who couldn't run a hot dog stand as depicted." In the film, one of Oppenheimer's colleagues claimed he wasn't fit to run a hot dog stand, let alone a nuclear weapons program that would change the tide of World War II. Nevertheless, General Leslie Richard Groves saw something in Oppenheimer that few others did. Quote, overweening ambition. With Groves as the project's director, he put Oppenheimer in charge of the Los Alamos laboratory, even as others stressed that Oppenheimer could be a security risk. Groves trusted him to cook the hot dogs. Meeting Oppenheimer, you were immediately impressed. You couldn't help it. There wasn't a better man. Number 7. Soviets' spies on the Manhattan Project. Although Oppenheimer ultimately wasn't a security risk, speculation of espionage still loomed around the Manhattan Project. There were rumors of espionage. There's no proof there was a spy at Los Alamos. Even after World War II ended, America's growing conflict with Russia led many to believe that atomic secrets were being passed over to the Soviet Union. These fears were not unfounded. There were actually several Soviet spies at Los Alamos, including machinist David Greenglass, engineer Oscar Saber, and physicist Theodore Hall. Arguably the most prominent spy was theoretical physicist Klaus Fuchs, played here by Christopher Denham. Fuchs shared information concerning the atomic and hydrogen bombs, which likely enabled the Soviets to test their own atomic bomb. Fuchs's involvement eventually led to his arrest in 1950, receiving a 14-year sentence. Fuchs ultimately served 9 years before returning to Germany. Number 6. Oppenheimer's friendship with Albert Einstein. It's a common misconception that Einstein was directly involved in the atomic bomb's creation. While he co-signed a letter to the president advocating the research of atomic energy, Einstein said, quote, "I do not consider Myself, the father of the release of atomic energy, my part in it was quite indirect, as we see in the film, though Einstein was friends with the father of the atomic bomb. The two first met when Einstein visited Caltech in 1932, commencing a nearly 30-year friendship. Oppenheimer later became a director at the Institute for Advanced Study, essentially making him Einstein's boss while their conversation by the pond feels like a creative liberty. The scene conveys their mutual respect for each other and fear of future nuclear warfare. Albert says, "But Robert, you are Mr. Atomic. You don't need them, they need you, just walk away." Number 5. His passionate and complicated relationship with Jean Tatlock. Before he knew Kitty Pruning, Oppenheimer entered a romantic relationship with Jean Tatlock, a Stanford graduate student meeting at a fundraiser. Tatlock introduced Oppenheimer to many communist ideals. Historians doubt that Oppenheimer officially joined the Communist Party like Tatlock did. Probably reasonable interpretation to say he was somewhat obsessed with her. She was a communist, he was interested in communist ideas. However, he believed in many concepts affiliated with the far-left group, even donating money to certain causes. Jean Tatlock was blunt, knew what she wants, but at no point does she ever punished for that. Although Oppenheimer cared deeply for Tatlock, proposing twice, she was reluctant to take that step. After marrying Pruning, Oppenheimer would rekindle his relationship with Tatlock, spending the night together in San Francisco during the midst of the Manhattan Project. This would be the last time Oppenheimer ever saw Tatlock, who took her own life several months later. Some suspected foul play, but others point to Tatlock's history of depression as proof to the contrary. Number 4. Louis Strauss's role in Oppenheimer's security hearing. Robert Downey Jr. plays Louis Strauss, an Institute for Advanced Study trustee who comes to intensely dislike Oppenheimer. "The Russians have a bomb. We're supposed to be years ahead of them. But what were you guys doing in Los Alamos?" The film suggests that the animosity between these two initially stemmed from a meeting at Princeton where Oppenheimer said something to Einstein without cluing in Strauss, and how many people were in these open discussion. Too many compartmentalization was supposed to be the protocol. We were in a race against the Nazis. Whether or not there is any truth to this, the anti-communist Strauss rarely saw eye to eye with Oppenheimer. It didn't help when Oppenheimer humiliated Strauss at a hearing. "I have just returned from the Pacific Proving Ground where I witnessed a test of former nuclear weapons not long after becoming the chairman of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission." Strauss spearheaded the drawn-out security hearings that would result in Oppenheimer having his security clearance taken away. While Oppenheimer had other political enemies, Strauss is seen as the one who dropped the bomb that crushed his spirit. He felt he couldn't give up his security clearance. He couldn't agree with them that he wasn't fit to serve as government. Number 3. Prima poisoned an apple. Oppenheimer will forever be linked to the atomic bomb, but a poisoned apple just as easily could have defined his legacy. As the film portrays, lab work wasn't Oppenheimer's strong suit while studying at Cambridge. This put him at odds with his tutor Patrick Blackett. Oppenheimer thus laced an apple with toxic chemicals and left it on Blackett's desk. The film suggests that Oppenheimer had a sudden change of heart, discarding the apple before Niels Bohr, played by Kenneth Branagh, can bite into it. This is where the film shifts to fiction, as the university did become aware of the apple and nearly put Oppenheimer on probation, since nobody ate the apple, though Oppenheimer's parents managed to sway the university into a slap on the wrist. Number 2. JFK voted against Strauss. Strauss might have stripped Oppenheimer of his security clearance, but his manipulative ways would come back to bite him. Truman needs to know what's next. What's next? When Strauss's term ended, he set his sights on becoming Secretary of Commerce. Although Strauss had President Eisenhower's backing, the Senate was split on him. Scientists were strongly against Strauss's confirmation, bringing his petty vendetta against Oppenheimer to light. While the Senate was critical of Strauss for a variety of reasons, this likely proved to be his undoing. Ultimately, Strauss's nomination imploded with a Senate vote of 46 to 49. Among those who voted against Strauss was John F. Kennedy, who was just starting to make a name for himself in the Senate. As president, almost a decade later, Kennedy granted Oppenheimer the Enrico Fermi Award. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1. President Truman called Oppenheimer a crybaby. While Oppenheimer thought the bomb had to be made, his creation left him with conflicted feelings. He was especially critical regarding the bombing of Nagasaki, arguing that Hiroshima was already enough concerned about where nuclear weapons were headed. He arranged a meeting with President Truman. Oppenheimer's agenda is to persuade Harry Truman of the importance of controlling this technology. Oppenheimer found it naive and foolish when Truman suggested that the Soviet Union would never produce their own bomb. The conversation blew up after Oppenheimer said, quote, "I feel I have blood on my hands." Supposedly, Truman mockingly handed Oppenheimer a handkerchief, claiming that he had more blood on his hands. Truman was just, "Get that guy out of my office. I was the one who made the decision." Truman called Oppenheimer a, quote, "crybaby scientist," declaring that he didn't want to see him in his office again. Truman nonetheless awarded Oppenheimer the Medal for Merit. A year later, blood on his hands, he exclaimed, "Damn it, he hasn't half as much blood on his hands as I have." Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from channel and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.